You had a great thread recently on Twitter about the things that you've learned after, a year watching golf from the broadcaster's perspective. Run us through a few of those things.
Yeah, let me pull it up. So the first one was AimPoint is here to stay. And I think there's just so many of the players now that are using the system. I would say a majority, so over 50%, I would say are using the system. And I don't use it myself, but I understand why people do and why players see it as an advantage, because how often your eyes play tricks on you, and it just gives you another way to read putts. It's just more information to help you come up with a solution week to week. And these guys have figured out how to do it with the green leveler devices on the putting green. They'll spend hours. They'll go and stand on a slope and say, this is 2.1, and they'll put the leveler down and say, oh, it's 2.2, and then they'll feel it in their feet, and that's how they practice. So they know what the slope is. This isn't something that is not a practice skill. It's just like lining a golf ball up. Lining a golf ball up is a skill. People always talk about using the line of your ball. Well, you have to practice doing it. And that is, if you realize that I've been using a line of my ball for the last year, but I'm really good at aiming a foot left with the line. It's like, well, why? That's a skill that you have to be able to practice. So,
right.
The next one was one of the most difficult shots in the game, which I think is the tucked right flag or the tucked left flag with the wind going the opposite direction. And I think that shot to me was one that I always used to kind of play just a pull shot, just kind of, especially right to left winds. I would ride it. I never really liked cutting it up against a wind. And I've been wrong more often than not early on in the year, where I was expecting players to ride the wind, and they wouldn't do it. They just would not do it. They would hold balls up into crosswinds so often to make the ball fly straight. And it wasn't a shot that I was particularly good at when I was playing, but the best in the world, they hold it up into crosswinds to make it go straight. So, what it effectively does, it makes the green play bigger, because first off, when you're riding the wind with a golf ball, it's effectively picking up momentum in the air. It's gaining speed with the wind, and if you're holding it up against the wind, the ball is slowing down as it's going up against the wind, which typically makes the ball go a little shorter as well. So you got to factor in normally an extra club, but as it's going slower up against the wind, it tends to land softer. So that's another way to make the green bigger. Is doing that. So as we move on to my list,
fascinating.
This was just after a nice cup of coffee. I'm just firing these away.
That was great.
I always was under the impression that everybody hit a stinger off the tee with an iron. If they wanted to, if it was a 3 or 2 iron, they got it down on the ground quickly like Tiger Woods would. And after watching a whole year, I tell you, most of these guys just hit your stock shot 3 iron. Just get it in play, because really a stinger shot is complicated to hit, because you're hitting down on it. You have to aim left because the steepness makes the ball start further to the right. So there's just a lot of variables that make hitting a stinger complicated, where just hitting your stock shot is just good enough. And the best wedge players in the world fight it down. I think most players understand that. I think front pins downwind and firm greens would be the exception to that. They would probably hoist it up in the air in that situation. But golf's a frustrating game. These players get pissed just like everybody else does.
Yeah.
And I think that the good ones really verbalize with their caddies after, like, it's just a good solid reset, because one of the things that cue you mentally is to be able to, okay, what are we doing right now? It's that one shot of a mentality. Like, everybody always says, you just got to take one shot at a time. Well, what does that mean when you're pissed?
Yeah, it's not so easy.
It's being able to take that deep breath to be able to, okay, what are we doing here? And verbalizing it. And I think that's important in not only golf, but a lot of different areas in your life, that you can take a deep breath, talk out what you're trying to do. So that's one thing I've noticed. And then just the driver being able to have a change-up pitch for the long players, a go-to shot, whether it's teeing it down, hitting a cut. That's something I see from the long players. And then just routine, just being able to start a stopwatch and have your routine be consistent. And your routine doesn't have to be perfect. I think a lot of people think their routines need to be dialed in the exact same every time, because conditions, sometimes affect that, with gusty winds or just being able to take a little extra minute on a tough pitch shot on like, how is it going through the turf? So it doesn't have to be, it's not a perfect science, but when it is, like, if nothing comes up, it should be, from pretty much within a second on how you move into the golf ball.
It was interesting. You said there that in your post that most tour players are within a couple seconds of each other in terms of their
100%
their routine, which is pretty wild, actually.
Yeah, it's from from the amount of looks they take, to how they shuffle their feet, to what they do with their arms as they walk in. Where do they grip the club? I mean, it's down to because it's what it is. You're training your brain to expect a routine. Like, this is part of handling nerves is running through a routine.